Starting tomorrow, August 1st, several new laws go into effect here in Minnesota, including a new law that has to do with child grooming. The new law will make child grooming a standalone felony in Minnesota. Here to talk about it is an attorney who often represents sexual abuse survivors, Stacey Benson. Stacey, thanks for coming on the show.
Sure, of course. Thank you for having me, Courtney. I appreciate it. It's a very important topic.
Yeah, so talk to me about this new law. What were the holes in the existing law, and what will this change?
Well, I think this legislation definitely addresses a long-standing gap in the law, and one that has allowed predatory behavior to escalate without consequence until the actual abuse occurs. And so criminalizing grooming underscores the importance of identifying and stopping grooming before the abuse occurs to keep kids safe. And I think it sends a clear message to schools and youth-serving organizations that we should be acting before the criminal sexual abuse occurs and not afterwards.
It expands the Minnesota Department of Education's authority to investigate allegations. Talk to me about this. The law puts a little more onus on the schools.
Yeah, I think that schools and any youth-serving organization where we send our kids today has a responsibility to investigate and see these warning signs for grooming. And a lot of those things happen in schools or may happen online as well. We see a big increase, and this law actually comes under the solicitation of children statutes. And so I anticipate probably seeing a lot of application to online communications with children too.
And law enforcement will now have to notify when a teacher is involved in something like this. Is that right?
That's my understanding. It will be interesting to see sort of in real time, and as this law becomes effective tomorrow, and how the cases are prosecuted and how reports are made from schools and by school officials.
And there's also new training requirements under this law.
There is. I believe it's by next year in 2027 where there's mandated reporter training that for all educational staff that has to occur by August of 2027 to cover identifying and mitigating and reporting grooming behaviors.
So talk to me about actually investigating grooming. In a court of law, how difficult or easy, I don't know, you tell me, will it be to prove that grooming has occurred?
Well, I think that's a great question, Courtney, because I think that it can come in, grooming can show up in so many different forms. I think what people often hear a lot about now is the online solicitation of kids and text messages, emails, social media platforms. But that's great evidence, right? Because you will actually have hopefully something in writing to show that this person is attempting to solicit a child for inappropriate or criminal sexual conduct. Not only online, but you have, the things that you can recognize in schools or parents can recognize with their kids too. If an adult or a person in position of authority is spending an inordinate amount of time or isolating a child or buying them gifts or desensitizing a child to physical touch or showing them pornographic images. All of this behavior, this grooming behavior, are things that law enforcement and our criminal justice system and hopefully our educators and teachers will be able to recognize better as well. And now that we have an actual punishment for this, it's great. I believe we're probably the 18th state that has passed some sort of criminal statute or law making grooming a criminal offense.
You said that the goal of the law is to get law enforcement involved and get these predators, locked up or charged before it turns into sexual abuse. But how hard will it be to prove the grooming if physical touch has yet to happen? If messages like you mentioned on social media or text haven't been exchanged. Will this be difficult for law enforcement to build a case on?
I think each case is going to be a unique case that, we'll have to, that remains to be seen. I do think that having the word of, a lot of times then it will be more of a he said, she said type of situation as well. And those can pose its challenges, of course, as well, depending on the age of the child, depending on the individual circumstances where you may have a child that's saying, this person has been saying these things to me, and you'll probably have an adult that denies it. And
Right.
so absolutely there could be its challenges when it comes to not having that physical evidence there. So it will be very interesting to see how this law is actually put into action. And I presume we won't see that for a number of months or be able to necessarily always have access to those facts in a case. But I definitely think that having the law, we're trending in the right direction, and it's a necessary shift in how Minnesota addresses this reality so that we can enable earlier intervention and put child safety first.
Does the new law empower victims to speak up?
I think it does. I think that any law that is passed, especially when it comes to child protection or criminalizing behavior when it comes to soliciting a child, and you hear more about it and more attention is given to it. So, the courage and the strength of the survivors that have come forward and helped pass this legislation and the legislatures, the more public exposure we can get, the more we talk about it, and the more and less taboo this topic is, I absolutely think that it's going to empower people to come forward.
Other states, you said there's other states who already have this law in place. What can we learn from those other states?
I think we absolutely can learn some things, and especially if you have prosecutors, or in my case, we're civil litigators, but hopefully there's conversations being had amongst law enforcement agencies. I know there's been a challenge historically sometimes with coordinating that communication, but my hope is that county attorneys' offices, states attorneys, attorney generals, they're having these conversations outside of passing this legislation to help work together to figure out what the best approach is and the challenges that have come up so that we can learn from that.
Yeah. Absolutely incredible. Stacey Benson, you're an attorney who often represents sexual abuse survivors. So appreciate you joining us and breaking down this new law. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Courtney. Much appreciated.